rolling in a lawsuit accusing them of cyber harassment for the criticism of her taking part in the Olympics. We'll talk about that in a few minutes' time, but let's start with inflation. If it rises, as expected, in about half an hour, how exactly is Labour going to pin that on the Tories?
Well, because it's from a month or so ago, they're going to pin
so
a lot.
It won't be their fault.
They're going to pin a lot on the Tories for the next year, at least. I mean, in fact, I bumped into a former Labour minister the other day and said, "How long have you got, do you think, to blame the Tories?" He said, "At least 2 years.
Wow.
At least."
Wow.
And he said, "I think we'll get away." He said, because nobody's listening to the Tories, nobody's interested in the Tories, so this will be a Tory problem.
In this case, it's a legitimate Labour, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I think compared to where we were in sort of 22 when we were talking about double figures, 11% inflation, you know, I think we don't know yet what it's going to be, but they're talking about something like 2.3%.
2.3, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think anything around the economy is going to be of concern to the Labour government because it restricts their potential for doing different things. That's why the budget in the autumn is going to be so interesting. But at the same time, they trailed very heavily, clearly, in the run-up to this general election that we had a month ago or so, that it was going to be difficult. And there was no easy choices on this. But so I think you're right, Andrew. Actually, they've still got some time here to not take responsibility in the way you might think for a government, because actually they're inheriting quite a massive challenge.
Rishi Sunak didn't have a crystal ball, but he did go for an early election, bizarrely, in my view, because all the... But was this... Did he know, did he fear inflation, which was one of his 5 targets? He actually got that target. They got it down to 2%. Did he know it was going to start ticking up?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, so hence go for an early election.
Yeah.
Well, Harry, I want to come to you now because we're talking about all these facts and figures, but where people are really going to start feeling things is in the supermarket shopping basket. Now, you've done a documentary on this. What strikes me from one of these reports is that those cheaper items, and many people switch to those no-label items to save money, they're the things that have gone up the most.
Yeah, this is the latest sort of set of figures to suggest that basically people on a budget are the people who've been hit hardest. So this is the IFS. They looked at a whole bunch of goods in a supermarket during the height of the cost of living crisis. So this is looking back over the last 2 years, and their prices went up by 36%. Those sort of cheapest items, the budget lines, exactly the same versions, but in the premium lines, only went up by 16%. So if you're trying to save money, yes, ultimately you won't be paying as much because you're buying the cheaper lots, but the rate of increase has gone up by more. So those cheaper households have been hit by an extra £100 because their rate of inflation is higher.
So they never stop tracking us, do they? No. They track us like a herd of wildebeest.
No, but my thing is, and can I play Bambi here and pretend I don't understand this? So they've seen, hang on, everybody has had to switch to these cheaper labels. Bada bing, bada bang, that's where we hike the prices up. That's where we make the money.
OK, so in defence of the supermarkets, what they would have said, or what they would say if they were here, is that those budget-owned brands, so the value lines you get in the supermarket, they never made much money on. Right. They were tiny amounts. So when they themselves got hit by inflation, because the cost of ingredients went up, the cost of petrol, of trucking it to the supermarket, they had to increase the prices, but they had very little margin on those cheap ones. So those appear to go up by far more. The pricey ones, they were already making lots of money on that, so they could get away with not putting up those prices as much.
What about so-called shrinkflation? And I've got a personal observation of this. Only a couple of weeks ago, I bought another kind of job lot of the toilet paper that I buy routinely from the same supermarket. And I took it into my downstairs loo, which has got one of those poles, you know, that you drop the things on. And there were a couple of the old ones left at the bottom. And I took the new one out and put it on, and it was smaller. It was shorter, and it didn't have as many sheets on it.
I thought you were going to talk about chocolates. I mean, no, but
I think we should know about Richard's, loo roll habits here.
Single ply.
But what I'm saying is that it's a real factor. We are paying the same for less.
And then there's another phrase, along with cheapflation, which is this thing on the front page of today's headlines, the shrinkflation of your loo roll. There's also skimpflation, where you get the same product, and what the manufacturers have done, you know, in collusion with the supermarkets, is, well, let's make the same lasagna or cottage pie, but with cheaper ingredients. And will anyone notice the difference? Because that is really hard to spot. If you're swapping a bit of beef out for some mushrooms, no one's going to, inspect the label. They'll just think, yeah, it kind of tastes the same because you don't really compare with something you bought a few months ago with what you buy now, and that is happening a lot.
Well, your documentary, which goes out this week, doesn't it?
It goes out tomorrow.
It basically, the headline is, are the supermarkets ripping us off? And everything you've just described and we've just gone through, would you say that summarises a rip-off?
Well, let's just say the supermarkets are making very, very healthy profits. They did struggle in the early days of lockdowns and COVID, and they were, you know, some people saw them as heroes. The last couple of years, their profits have bounced back really strongly. I mean, the biggest supermarket in Britain's profits doubled from 1.4 billion to 2.8 billion. I won't name them, but you can look them up.
Those two figures again?
1.4 billion to 2.8 billion.
Wow.
So, you know, they employ a lot of people. We want them to be profitable. We want them to be successful.
Can they employ some more people on the checkouts? That would be really helpful.
Well, they've cut
because
back,
having to stand there with those machines and then have someone come along and bling you through because it stopped working. Can they spend some more money on the workers?
You know, Caroline makes a really, really important point. All the supermarkets have got rid of some workers, and that's one of the ways they keep their profits up, by making the existing workers work far harder and forcing us all to self-serve.
Are they doing this as like a cartel? Are they all taking bits out of the lasagna?
No, I don't think it is cartel. They are still very, very competitive.
Right.
But we, ultimately, are feeling the pain far more than they are feeling the pain.
Asda has announced, actually, that they're going to go against that trend and they're going to hire more staff now. But they're playing us again. We're constantly being played. They're watching our reactions and what we say we will and won't do when we won't buy, and then they react to it. So they're always one step ahead.
Yeah, and I think what's really been highlighted in about the cost of living crisis is just how disproportionately those people on low incomes and fixed incomes are affected.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite startling, isn't it, in terms of... I get what you're saying, Harry, about the margins on those lower-cost products. But if you're on a fixed income, on every product, if it all goes up a bit, suddenly you're paying, you know, £40, £50 more a fortnight for a shop or something, you know, even more in some cases. And that... You know, and meanwhile, the better off, you know, those of us who maybe have more money to spend on leisure and everything, we don't feel that.
Probably you wouldn't even notice it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, leisure is one of the things that's forcing inflation up. There is the Taylor Swift effect. What? We do think the reason why inflation may go up from 2% to 2.3% at 7 o'clock is because the price of cheap airlines, hotels and leisure, and we think a little bit of this is to do with the Taylor Swift effect. And people willing to spend £600 to go and watch her, to spend, you know, many hundreds of pounds to fly to Edinburgh, to book hotels. All hotel prices have gone up. It's the Taylor Swift effect.
Because of Taylor Swift.
So those with more money are pushing up inflation for those with not as much, basically.
I wouldn't pay 600 quid to go and see Taylor Swift.
I heard of somebody paying £2,000 for a ticket to Taylor Swift.
What, here in the UK?
Here in the UK. Wow. You know who you are.
Wow. All right, thank you very much indeed for that, Harry. And we look for... What channel does your doco go out on?
It's on Channel 5 on Thursday night.
OK, we'll look forward to that. Thank you very much indeed. Let's talk about this breaking news story. Maina Kff, the Algerian boxer, who... widely reportedly carries the XY chromosome, which is the male chromosome, as opposed to the double X chromosome, which is the woman's chromosome. And yet, nevertheless, she was fighting other boxers with the double X chromosome, with her XY, reportedly, chromosome. Now, that attracted, we all know, huge amounts of criticism and comment. She has hit back now. She's, as I said earlier, she's filed a lawsuit to French authorities over what she calls acts of aggravated cyber harassment, after they pretty much led the outcry against her at the Paris Olympics. What do we make of that?
Well, look, she's entitled to sue, but if she's suing Elon Musk and J.K. Rowling, good luck. She's suing two of the richest people I've ever heard of. So how's that going to go? But, look, you just look at her.
Don't stop.
No, hang on. Look, come on. The woman... the Italian boxer who was when this first was brought to our attention, said she'd never been hit so hard in her life.
But then she apologised later on.
But she told what she actually felt in the first instinct. She felt it was unfair. She felt she was fighting a bloke.
I'm sending a defence barrister here on her. I've gone then. Make
well, because she lost fights beforehand. She also comes from Algeria. And if you seriously think someone could even think of being transgender in somewhere like Algeria, you're living on another planet.
Well, she's not being accused of being trans... Well, some people wrongly accused her of being transgender. That was an initial misapprehension. But she hasn't denied that she carries the XY chromosome, and that gives her all sorts of physical benefits.
Who was the South African runner who was the same? There are many women... There's a whole range of
two wrongs don't make a right.
I've probably got less, after the menopause. I mean, are we really going to talk about percentages of hormones? Because what we haven't talked about is the huge range throughout women.
Yeah, but you wouldn't put a welterweight...
You do have to, for girls and women's sport, look at some of these...
Yeah.
And it's complicated and it's difficult. And I think, look, the sort of stuff that was going on online,
from the
abuse...
lips, weren't they, a lot of them?
It's horrible,
the abuse that was horrible.
But at the same time, why was there this issue? And part of it was because the Federation for Boxing isn't recognised, from what I understand, by the Olympic organisers. So what usually happens is all the sports federations, they set the policy for their sport, so athletics and everything else. Because this particular federation, I think, was banned or something to do with recognising Russia or what have you, it ended up in the hands of the Olympic organisers. And I think everyone recognises, and it's not her fault in this, it is not her fault that actually this wasn't sorted out beforehand, because in previous tournaments and events, actually she and another boxer that took part was not allowed to take part because of issues around the biology of all this. So that actually has got to be sorted out. But I mean, it's a toxic debate, isn't it?
Yeah, but
it's abuse.
And what about...
But there's a difference here. You talked about the runner who was Caster... Was her name Caster Semenya?
Yeah.
So there was great controversy over her racing. Did she have an unfair advantage because of the male chromosome? Look, it's one thing racing against someone and beating them, but in a boxing match, you could beat them to death.
But here's the thing, it's
got to be a different rule.
Why can't we have grown-up conversations
I agree with that.
name-calling and abuse? Meanwhile, you've got somebody who was a convicted child rapist playing volleyball.
Well, nobody was supporting that either.
No, well, I wasn't.
But also the other thing about the example you've given, I think in her situation, there were issues around testosterone and actually reducing the levels of that, because that's a factor. And from what I understand, I think she didn't want to do that, and a consequence of that was actually she came out because she wasn't winning the races.
Well, I think in the main Kellett's case, reading between the lines here from this breaking story and the material we've been given, it sounds as if what she's really doing is she's taking them on for their choice of language, the way that they spoke online. That's why she calls it cyberbullying. Pardon?
And Trump.
And she's going
saying
after
Donald Trump
well.
would also be part of the investigation because he tweeted. So whether or not he's named in the lawsuit, he'll inevitably be looked at into part of the prosecution.
I must say, I did think, watching the debate, I wasn't on the show here last week, and I know you discussed it on the show. Watching the debate at home, I mean, widely, globally, I felt that there was a very interesting argument to be had. And it was, to me, it rested completely on the whole difference between the chromosomes. That's where it was. The language that was surrounding it was horrible.
Yes, that's
and not appropriate. And you don't have to talk about each other like that. And I think that's what sparked this lawsuit. Look, terrible report that's come out this morning. I can't believe this. So far, 50 women in this country have been killed by men so far this year. 50. It's the highest number ever after eight months or so. And attacks against women on trains in the last 2 years has gone up by 50%. And you would think automatically that those were attacks maybe at the end of the day, the last train. No, this is in the rush hour, the evening rush hour. That's where most of these attacks take place. 50% rise over 2 years. What is happening to us?
Well, I think that part of it is this has always been with us, sadly. I think another statistic that really made me think again about this was that every 3 days a woman is killed by a man in a violent act in this country. And that lends to your 50 women this year so far.
It's an epidemic.
It is really awful. Part of it, I think, is that actually it's good that women are reporting this. I mean, if you go on the tube now or if you go on a train, there are actually signs up in the carriages about if you're worried about something, if you're feeling, under threat, ring this number. But, behind all this is what is going on?
Well,
why are we dealing with this, environment where women are going about their daily lives and being threatened? When I was a young woman many years ago, and this is what makes me think about it now, you look forward and think things will change. So I can remember being on a tube, going home from work, quite decades ago, and a guy basically exposed himself to me. I mean, literally, the carriage was full of people. I was looking and thinking, am I going crazy here? No, that can't be happening. And then I thought, my God, it is happening.
What did you do?
I basically, got into a tube station. He got off. I stood up. I wasn't sure. a man said to me, he'd seen what's happening. We went after him and basically found some transport police. They managed, and other workers, and it ended up in court 9 months later. But do you know what happened when I went to court? It turned out it happened exactly to another woman further south on the tube line about half an hour earlier. So, you know, these are the things happening. So I think about, you know, when I hear these stories, I think about this and think, oh, my God, it is still happening. It's still happening.
A lot of women have, if not the same story, similar ones.
Yeah.
What is interesting, and you mentioned that another man actually helped you, in the figures, 51% of those who've been victims of sexual offending said that other passengers had actually tried to help them.
Well, that's, but only 50%?
Yeah.
Well, you'd rather hope there'd be more, actually.
Come back to your question. It's about cause and effect. Now, you can't look at a figure like that. You say the problem's always been with us, and you're absolutely right. Happened to my sister, you know, about the same time as I think it happened to you. But it's gone up 50% in 2 years, OK? So we've got to look at why. I would suggest that it's possibly two large factors here are pornography and social media. The misogynistic sites on social media, which have millions and millions of male followers, that it is actually, not subtly, but quite brutally, melding young men in particular into a misogynistic army.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, whatever we want to do about, you know, when these things happen, getting justice for the victim, behind it is about what are we teaching our boys and girls? What are we talking about in terms of respectful relationships?
But I don't
about
think
kindness, about what isn't appropriate? Because I think a lot of kids, boys, are accessing pornography, which gives them a completely distorted sense of what a sexual relationship should be like and how that should work. And unless we get in front of this and deal with this in a better way, I'm afraid, you know, these ideas about what it is to be a boy, what it is to be a man, and how you sort of in some ways say that's being manly and that isn't being manly, they have to be addressed.
No, I agree.
They have to be addressed.
It's playing out when we talk about self-harm and suicide figures. But are we concentrating... I mean, we need to concentrate on young boys, but we're not talking about just young boys. Is there... and let me throw this at you, Andrew. Is there, even within the press, we're still talking about lithe and comely and taking pictures of women and flaunting their bodies when they're just on holiday in the beach. There still is quite a lot of sexist language, I feel, in in many, many newspapers still going on. It's not helping.
I think, actually, Richard put his finger on it. It is social media, I'm afraid. That's where it really is. Look, years ago, we used to have Page 3. Remember?
Oh, God.
Long gone. Long gone.
Thank God.
I think it is social media, and I think boys look at stuff which is pretty corrupting. And these social media, it is the unregulated Wild West in all sorts of areas about sex, violence, and young boys, men. Men.
Grown men.
Often they're not youngsters, are they?
No,
they're men who should know a lot better.
No, and it's almost scarier when it's someone who looks like your dad or, you know...
your granddad or your uncle.
Yes.
They're looking at all this muck on social media, and I'm afraid it's turning them.
There's one potential positive to it, though. It could be, and this has been put forward this morning, it could be that we're getting extra reporting of these offences, that women are feeling more confident at coming forward and reporting it. So that could be a part of the factor in the rise, but it's incredibly worrying.
More cameras.
And more cameras, that's right, yeah.
London's
but it's just the fact that these men are committing these acts of sexual aggression, as I say, at rush hour, which makes them so brazen. They must sort of think that it's all right in some fundamental way.
Because they're probably getting away with it. Because so many women... All right, more women are reported, but a lot of women aren't.
But also, don't you think at rush hour, everybody's sort of squished together
really
and they think, I won't be seen?
Yeah, I mean, and let's be honest, you're in a situation and you think, is that really happening? Am I really being groped by this person? You know, what's going on here?
Or is it just
the train
moving
exactly, you know.
Exactly.
And by the time you've gone through that, he's off.
Right, let's have a look at Liz Truss. Remember Liz Truss? And remember, I think it was the Daily Star that made the lettuce joke. They said, which is going to last longer, this lettuce or Liz Truss? And it turned out that it was the lettuce. Well, the joke continues to haunt her. This is what happened to her when she was about to make a speech. Was it in America? Was she in the States?
Yeah, I think she was in America.
Yeah, let's have a look.
So I think that he will probably win.
I've no idea where that's come from.
As you said, she was wearing green.
She was wearing green. I'd never wear green again.
That's pretty cruel. I mean...
She's paid a lot of money to turn up, I'm sure, you know, for goodness sake. You know, more than the price of a lettuce.
I wouldn't have walked off.
No, I would have made a joke of it.
Yeah, she should have made a joke of it. Made it, yeah.
That's led by donkeys, isn't it? Yes,
Yeah.
again. Didn't they prank Nigel Farage or someone else before?
Yeah.
I think they've done things like this. And I think you're right. She should
You've got to suck it up.
Because now, everywhere she goes now, they're going to do this, aren't they?
That's going to be a meme, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. So brazen it out.
Yes.
That's what she should have
Now,
done. I'm surprised.
If we all want to reach the maximum potential in our lives, we have to go to Australia. Because that's another report out this morning. It is... People, if you go to Australia, you will live... if you're a woman to be 86...
I shouldn't have left.
And you should have stayed there, darling. Or if you're a man, 81, and that compares to 79 for a man here and 83, I think, for women. So, on average, 2 or 3 years longer life expectancy in Australia. Why do you think that is?
I know.
I think it's a good news story for Australia, because sometimes when you think about Australia, you think about snakes and sharks and spiders and this sort of thing. I think when my daughter went to Australia to go into work there for a while, I was sort of saying to things like to her, so make sure you put the toilet seat down, that something crawls out of it or something like this. But, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? 2 years longer than... those of us in the UK, I think 5 years longer than America. So, yeah, it's about apparently the lifestyle, things, public health initiatives, smoking rates are much lower.
Don't forget,
outdoors helps, I suppose.
But don't forget, it was the first... They have one of the highest skin cancer rates, but don't forget, because I know, because I was involved in part of that, Australia was the first country to ban smoking within buildings. So they've had now, 30 years.
That long ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
When we came to England in 1998, when you did that frightening interview that you showed yesterday,
with you,
my children were absolutely shocked. They were, 4 and 9, had never seen anybody smoking in buildings, and they were going up and they were taught that at school, and they go, Mummy, that person's going to die. You know, like, they had never, ever seen, at the age of 4 and 9, had never seen anybody smoke. So bear in mind, that's a big driver of if you took smoking away.
And I'm very proud, as I was Public Health Minister, to be behind the legislation to bring that into this country. And, you know, we are seeing impacts of that, which are good, but clearly, you know, Australia was way ahead of us.
I remember the first time I went to Australia being stunned by how healthy people were. People running, jogging everywhere. Yeah. It's the sea.
But they've got an obesity problem now as well.
Not as bad as we have.
Well, actually, it comes pretty high, but their early intervention, they concentrate, like many... countries in the Netherlands and what have you, they concentrate on prevention rather than our poor National Health Service treating you when you're ill. They've got brilliant interventionary prevention. I mean, I was part of... I had a women's doctors group. It was just for women. They would reach out to you when your pap smear, your breast... everything was for women, and that was in 1985.
So they were ahead of the curve.
Way ahead.
Yeah. I have to say, just before we leave the subject of smoking, I've said this on the show before, but it just shows how times have changed. You talk about your kids being shocked. I think back to when I was a little boy and going and sitting on Santa's knee in the local supermarket, and Santa was smoking. Seriously. And not just 1 year. He must have been the regular employee, but he used to smoke as he, gave you the present. As you were sitting on there, and it didn't seem unusual. It didn't seem odd.
But it's when you see the old sort of thing, the programmes, that used to happen on programmes, didn't
Absolutely.
it? You know, news people would be there smoking and news programmes and everything else.
And obviously there's the addiction factor, but I always thought that one of the reasons that so many people smoke was because it was seen as cool. Obviously linked to the Hollywood image and all the rest of it. So I can't quite understand why vaping's taken off in such a big way, because I think people who vape look silly.
And I think the worrying about vaping... Vaping is fine if it's getting people off fags. I speak as one who used to smoke. I stopped when I was 40.
Do you vape?
No, I don't do anything at all. But I worry that how many young people now are vaping, and they're being lured into it by these vaping shops which look like sweet shops.
And also, it's a bit like, do you remember when we used to have Alco Pops? To make them
absolutely.
And they've done the same thing. So you can get salted caramel flavour, you can get strawberry and chocolate and things like this. It is disgraceful, that marketing.
It really is.
Now, what about blokes taking off their tops? We're full of new studies and reports this morning.
No, I'm not about to, Caroline. Thank you for asking.
Blokes should stop taking their tops off in public during heat waves because most people find it grim. 75% of men and women said that guys should not take off their shirt unless they're at the pool, or on the beach. They find
or look buff.
Or look, yeah, there was that codicil, yeah. if they look fantastic. I mean, there's just something crude about seeing a guy walking down the street shirtless, isn't there?
With their man boobs.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Belly's on the beach. That's what I say. Belly's on the beach.
I quite agree.
Yeah, look, I think there's a time and a place, isn't there?
There is.
And, you know, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want to see, to be honest, a woman walking down the street in a swimming costume either. I feel a bit like, maybe not the right place in the checkout or what have you. But, no, I think there's a time and place for these
There's something slightly threatening about it, I think.
What?
About seeing a bloke walking down bare chest. No, not in that sense. Just physically slightly in your face.
No, it's not. I agree with you. I'm old-fashioned. I think you keep certain codes of dress for the beach and others for when you're in town.
Yeah. Maybe a park. If you're sunbathing in a park, maybe you can take your kids off, your shirt off.
All right, let's loop back to politics. Keir Starmer says he's going after the work shy. How's that going to work?
Well, good luck, because there's a lot of them. What is it, 9 million or something extraordinary? Look, unemployment figures fell yesterday quite sharply, but there are still millions of people who appear not to want to work, won't work, and I don't know how they're going to get back into it, but they should.
Well, I think we need to separate out a little bit there, Andrew, because...
Here we go.
Because we have people, for example, who fall out of work for lots of different reasons.
What, 9 million?
Hang on a second.
Well, that
I'll
9
come
million...
to that. Let me finish. They fall out of work, they get an unemployment benefit, and quite a lot of them are going back into work. The issue here is those people who are on benefits associated with having some health condition. It could be mental or it could be physical. And that is worrying, because something like a fifth of working-age people are currently on those sort of benefits. Now, that is different than being on what we used to call the dole or something else. It is a higher rate because it reflects that situation. And the truth is that lots of people have times in their life where they have sickness that makes they can't work. Lots of people actually live with disabilities. And actually, for a lot of those people, they would like to work and they need to be supported to do that. But we have taken, I agree, we have taken our eye off the ball about the sort of route ways back into work for that group of people. And I can remember when, remember we used to have incapacity benefit in this country, which was the benefit that used to be for people who had ill health or sickness. And someone once told me, when I was employment minister, that if you were 2 years on incapacity benefit, the likelihood of you going back into work was really, really low. So unless you have occupational health, unless you have intervention really early on, and it's not for everybody, there are some people who will not maybe be able to go back to work or work full-time, then you miss the opportunity. But for Labour, the challenge is this: it's not cheap. To have those sort of interventions costs money. A lot of our job centres and others just aren't there in the same way anymore to provide that. But it's absolutely crucial, because if you look at the age profile, I mean, they're very young and may never work.
And it's got much worse since the pandemic.
Yes, it has.
I'm afraid. Much worse. People got out of the habit of going to work and don't want to go back to work. And I'm afraid that there's still this problem with the benefit system. Sometimes it's more advantageous financially to be on benefits and in low-paid work.
Tell us about the state of politics in this country now, because this policy is something you'd expect from a Tory Prime Minister. The Tories were going after the work side. You wouldn't really expect it to be high on the agenda of an incoming Labour government.
Well, I think the headline is not what Labour is putting out there. That is not Keir Starmer's headline. That was made for him. But I think, again, Labour has got a growth agenda. They want to make sure that we have more people who are in this country taking up the jobs and opportunities. And, of course, they're getting employers saying to them, we can't find the workers, so we have to have people coming from overseas to come and work here. So they do have to address this, because they're not going to get the outcomes they want in terms of a more healthy, growing economy unless more of our population, our working-age population, are contributing to that. And it's not just about helping the country. It's good for people to work.
Of course it is.
It's also a multifaceted problem. I mean, when you look at things like hygiene problem, poverty, if you can't wash your clothes, if you can't wash and what have you. So I don't think... I think that headline is maybe somewhat misleading. Getting people back to work is not...
But I don't think Karma will mind that headline. All right.
There's too many people. There's too many people swinging the lead.
But Mr. Daily Mail columnist, let's finish this. How do you think Starmer's doing in PR terms? I mean, here he is going after the work shy. Here he is banging up people for rioting, going after them, making sure they get sent to jail. What do you think his image is like in this country?
Well, actually, he had a boost when he first got in, and then the poll rating went down again. I still think he's boring. dull and...
you want a showman?
No, he's not a showman at all, but perhaps that's what the country wants. Perhaps the country doesn't want a showman. He's boring as hell.
All right. Thank you both very much indeed. Enjoyed that.